Help support the show by joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Also, hit that like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content.
Okay. Well, Shador Sanders certainly threw a tiny little wrench into the plan, but it's a swerve that I'm willing to go with. For those of you who don't know, Shador Sanders was caught speeding in his car, going over 100 miles per hour on the highway. And look, I don't expect this to be that big of a deal as far as like how he's handled by the Cleveland Browns or how the team views him. I know there's going to be a lot of different conversations being had about his maturity because he was doing speeding at 100 miles per hour. And I have a lot to say on it that I want to get into before we talk about what it looks like if Shedeur is able to start, because this is something that could potentially stop him from being able to start, because I've seen a lot of people acting like, oh, well, this doesn't matter. It's nothing, everybody speeds. And I cannot stand that line of thinking when it comes to people speeding on the highway, especially at egregious speeds like Shedeur was. Like, me personally, I think we don't say enough about how horrific the consequences of speeding that fast on the highway is. I have seen way too many stories come across my timeline. I'm sure you've seen stories come across your timeline of entire families wiped out because some asshole wants to drive 100 miles per hour on the highway. So I have no tolerance for those kind of crimes, right? Drunk driving, speeding on the highway. I think that's some of the most selfish, irresponsible, immature shit you can do, me personally. We can have to debate whether he was speeding at night and nobody was out there. I still think that's dangerous because you never know who's going to pop onto the highway. Even if it's at night, even if the highway's relatively empty. If you want to argue about the ethics of speeding on the highway with me, I'm not your guy. I don't fuck with none of that stuff. So yeah, like him speeding, it is a immature thing for him to do. It's not what you want your quarterback to be out here doing. And it is something that, it's going to be something that people who already felt like his slide in the draft was justified is going to use to be able to justify not wanting him to start, right? Like, that's definitely going to be a feather in their cap. I didn't like speeding when Myles Garrett was the one doing it. And I don't think it's appropriate for Shador Sanders to be out here speeding. And honestly, it's bigger than Shador, right? Too many of these athletes. We saw the story when Jalen Carter was coming out of the draft, where he was racing with his teammates and killed like 3 people trying to race on the highway. Seems like every year somebody from Georgia gets arrested for egregious speeding. Henry Ruggs killed a man over this. This stuff is like far too tolerated, in my opinion, and just like society in general. And then like when sports fans get their hands on it, depending on if they like the guy or not, people are just going to act like it's cool. It's fine. This is what people do nowadays. And this is just an irresponsible thing for people to do. Like, again, the vast majority of people drive at the normal speed limit, get where they need to find. If you want to get a thrill, it shouldn't come at the expense and the safety of everybody else. It really shouldn't. Somebody driving a minivan with like 12 kids in it shouldn't be scared to death on the highway because you want to be a fucking asshole and drive 100 miles per hour on it. So I'm not going to make any excuses for Shedeur driving 100 miles. I think it's a dickish thing to do. I don't like it. The more I talk about it, the more furious it makes me because it's irresponsible. And it just lacks that's not the kind of decision making you want to see out of your quarterback. Not gonna make any, even if I like Shedeur as a prospect, I don't like that. That's a bad move. If that or incidents like that were popping up before he got drafted, then it happens after he gets drafted, then that's also something you have to consider, right? Like, we don't know the full story on why Shedeur fell to the 5th round. And it might be because he has a lot of incidents like this pop up on his record. when you look at it, when you look into it, and you're like, oh, this guy speeds a lot. Could be a Henry Ruggs situation. Just so my message to athletes overall, and just anybody who has a super nice fancy car, there are places you can go where you could drive that car as fast as you want. Don't do it when there's people just trying to get to point A to B in places where people getting point A to B, because nobody deserves to die because you wanted to go fast. Nobody. And I don't care how good you think you are at driving that fucking car. You're not good enough. You're not fucking Dale Earnhardt. Slow the fuck down. So we see somebody drunk driving, and we obviously condemn that, and we give that the right amount of scrutiny for drunk driving because of how reckless it is to the other drivers on the road. Well, what's really the difference from being a drunk driver, which is reckless inherently, and being a reckless driver, which is reckless inherently? I don't really see a difference between the two, and that's why I'm a bit more harsh on this. I think reckless driving should be a lot harsher of a penalty. But again, that's my thoughts on the local law part of it. Either way, with Shedeur, not something I think he needs to be cut for or anything like making some kind of, or the Browns need to suspend him internally for it. He needs to learn his lesson, though, for sure. I don't want to see this ever come up again. My boomer rant aside about people driving fast, and Shedeur doing that, okay, that's out the way. Don't like the Shedeur did that, but for being realistic about if that's going to affect his ability to become the starting quarterback, probably not, right? Unless he gets jail time for it, which he's very unlikely to get. It's going to be a ticket. He's going to get a ticket. But he's not going to face jail time. He's not going to face any real legal consequences for this. So it's just going to be something that if he doesn't replicate again for the rest of the year, not really going to be that big of a deal. That being said, how does Shador Sanders become the starting quarterback of the Cleveland Browns? One, slow the fuck down in the car. That's first. Be careful. Slow down. It's a nice car. Slow down when you drive it. Two, I think in order for Shador Sanders to be like the week one starter, he would have to be undeniable in training camp. Not like we think he looks good, but just straight up, it would be malpractice not to play him. He's that good in training camp and in the preseason. We're talking about doing stuff that Russell Wilson did in the preseason. We're talking about doing stuff that Dak Prescott did in the preseason. Like, it has to be unreal how this guy looks in order for him to start. You have to basically look at him and say, he's a top 15 quarterback. If you're not saying that realistically, not just because you want to say that, not just because you want to believe that that's going to be the case, but because you legitimately believe that this dude's a top 15 quarterback, like not just people who are part of the Sanders Hive are saying that, but like real analysts are looking at him and saying, no, like real talk, he looks like a top 15 quarterback. He's tearing up the Eagles in joint practice against their first team. He's tearing up the Carolina Panthers in joint practice against their first team. He goes in the preseason. He looks incredible every snap in the preseason. Outside of anything like that, he will very likely not start week one. And even if he does look like that, there is still a chance that he does not start week one. Now, why is this the case? Is this because the Browns aren't serious about winning football games? Is this because the Browns are afraid of Shador Sanders starting or anything goofy like that? No. It is because the more potential Shador Sanders shows, the more incentive you have if you're the Cleveland Browns to not rush his development, right? It's kind of a curve here, right? Like there's a certain threshold he can pass where it's undeniable you got to play him right away. But most of this curve will exist in he looks great, let's not play him till week 7. Like the more and more you start to believe in this guy, you start to believe in what he's doing in the building, right, in the meeting rooms, the more and more it becomes likely that you would hold off playing him, right? This is something I talked about with Kyron Samuel, something I talked about with Tyvis Powell. Both of these guys, by the way, Tyvis and Kyron Samuels, are bigger Shedeur fans than I am. I like Shedeur. I have a first round grade on Shedeur, but I saw Tyvis talk about taking him early in the first. Same thing with Kyron, right? Like they were significantly higher on Shedeur than I was. And even they agree with me when you look at the Browns schedule and when you just look at how the NFL works in general, there's no rush to put him out there. The more you believe in him, the more you should want him to wait to get out there, because a lot of development in the NFL is about timing, right? And Shedeur has this song, Perfect Timing. Well, you want the timing to be right. And maybe the right timing isn't at the beginning of the season, because those are probably the toughest games on the Browns schedule. And the reason I want Shedeur to avoid those games, if you actually believe in him as a prospect, is not because I don't think he's capable of ever playing good against good teams, but he's going to be a rookie. And think about the defensive coordinators he's going up against as a rookie, right? Because we look at this run and we're like, oh my God, look at these defenses. These defenses are incredible. And that's true. And that should factor into this as well. But just think about the defensive coordinators he's going up against. Al Golden, week 1, Cincinnati. That was the best defensive coordinator in college football. Now, you could think what you want about the Cincinnati Bengals defense. It was Rudy Poo last year, but they got one of the best defensive coordinators in college football, which Shedeur did not play in the Big 12 last year. And they got Trey Henderson. So to a rookie, that defense is going to be pretty formidable. A lot of veterans on that defense. They know how to confuse a rookie. They can look good versus a rookie, right? Just because the Bengals are a bad defense don't mean they can't have a good game throughout a 17-game season. That's a game where it's very likely the Bengals probably going to play one of the better defensive games of the year. Then you go at Baltimore, one of the most ferocious defenses in the NFL, a defensive coordinator who is ultra familiar with what the Browns do, right? Zach Orr has seen the Browns. He's been on the Ravens staff since 2020, which means he is prepared for the Kevin Stefanski offense 8 times in the last 4 years. So he's going to be really prepared for the Cleveland Browns. Then you play the Green Bay Packers, who have a really, really solid defense, right? Xavier McKinney, a lot of guys, veteran guys on their defense. Their defensive coordinator is Jeff Hafley, who is one of the rising stars in the NFL, assistant ranks. Then you have Dan Campbell in the Detroit Lions, again, another defense that's amazing. You have Brian Flores, and then you have the Pittsburgh Steelers and Mike Tomlin. Not only are these just defenses with talent that you really don't want to throw a rookie into, these are week-long opportunities for some of the most seasoned, in some cases, like Mike Tomlin, Brian Flores, seasoned defensive minds to be able to hone in on the early career of a rookie quarterback. You would rather avoid that, right? Because you're going to expose that rookie quarterback, whoever they are, to a lot of things that they really don't need to be exposed to in the first 6 weeks of their career. Like, it only makes sense. Unless you think he's so damn good that he can take those punches and handle them in the first 6 weeks of his career, which is rare, right? Like, even Joe Burrow struggled in these situations, and Joe Burrow's one of the better quarterback prospects to ever come out. It's going to be tough. So why even do that, right? Like, unless you think Shedeur will be the difference from competing in these games to winning these games, which is very unlikely that we get to that point by the end of training camp. Not saying that Shedeur could never get to that point, but just saying him getting to that point in 2 months as a rookie quarterback, very unlikely. People forget rookie quarterbacks usually don't look good. I know we keep going to these examples of a couple of guys who have looked amazing their rookie year. But you see the year Drake May had, that's a normal rookie year for a quarterback, right? Like, these are rookie years for quarterbacks, aren't these like amazing automatic ascension to the Pro Bowl years. I think we've kind of gotten our clock readjusted because of some outliers over the last couple of years. A rookie quarterback going through that gauntlet, not a great idea, right? So for the most part, even if Shedeur looks great, right, not undeniable, but legitimately great, like he keeps having great efficiency. He's playing with the second and third team. He's tearing up the second and third team. Looks all right against some of the first team that he goes up against, but still continues to dominate in the second string. Maybe he looks good a couple of days with the first string, right? Like, gives you positive thoughts to actually like be excited about when he sees the field. If that happens, he'll be playing week 7, week 8, right? I think the real competition for Shador Sanders is not to be the week 1 starter, right? Dylan Gabriel's kind of competing for that. Kenny Pickett and Joe Flacco are 1,000% competing for the week 1 starting job. That's a different competition than the one that Shador Sanders is in right now. What Shador Sanders is competing with, or who Shador Sanders is competing with, is Dylan Gabriel, right? Because between Dylan Gabriel and Shador Sanders, they're both going to make the team. But one of these quarterbacks during training camp are going to give the coaching staff and the front office more reason to take them serious than the other. That is what this battle is about. Which rookie quarterback will the Browns front office and head coaching staff take seriously? That's what the battle is. It's not about week 1. Shedeur, not going to play week 1. Dylan Gabriel, very unlikely to play week 1. Like, the scenario where one of these rookies starts week 1, I don't think it's very high. Because why would you want to throw a rookie you care about into that gauntlet? I wouldn't. I would avoid it like hell. If I could, right? Like, maybe it becomes a situation where you can't avoid it. But if I can, I'm going to avoid that. If that's just how I think about it, right? So if you think about it like that and you're asking yourself, okay, then what are these other two guys really competing for? It's to compete for the opportunity to be taken serious. Which one of these dudes they're going to treat like the project for the next couple of years while they figure out what they want to do at quarterback? If Shedeur looks amazing during camp and Dylan looks so-so, it'd probably be Shedeur. If Dylan looks amazing during camp and Shedeur is struggling with stuff, then, it's probably going to be Dylan, right? Or if Dylan and Shedeur both look pretty good, but Shedeur keeps getting speeding tickets because he doesn't know how to drive on a highway properly, then it's going to be Dylan, because you don't want a quarterback that you have to deal with that kind of bullshit about, especially coming off of Deshaun Watson where you had all the bullshit in the world to deal with. So all of these things go into that evaluation. He's not in competition with Joe Flacco. He's not in competition with Kenny Pickett. He's in competition with Dylan Gabriel. Now, me personally, I find it hard to believe that Shedeur is not going to win that competition, even though the Browns seem to have given a little bit of a head start to Dylan in that competition, because that's who they drafted in the 3rd round. Shedeur, somebody they drafted in the 5th round. Now, again, when you look at the assets that they spent to get that pick, the 2 6s to get that 144 selection, roughly adds up to about what you used for Dylan Gabriel. But at the end of the day, 3rd round pick, 5th round pick. This is how it's going to be looked at. They had the opportunity to take Shedeur at 94. They did not take Shedeur at 94. They took Shedeur 144. That's just what it is, right? So whatever it was that held them up on taking this dude 50 spots earlier, they got to figure that out, right? And stuff like speeding, getting tickets like this at the quarterback position, because, you can say wide receivers do this stuff all the time. This is not something you want your quarterback to be out here doing, right? You don't want Peyton Manning out here driving 100 miles per hour. That's ridiculous, right? So this is not stuff that helps him at all in this competition. But if that's what he wants to do, if he wants to become the starter eventually, he has to beat out Dylan Gabriel and prove to the Browns that he's the one worth taking seriously amongst the two, because they're only going to have time to take one guy seriously. The other guy is going to be off to the sides, and he's going to have to get mental reps, right? So who's going to be the guy they take seriously? Well, it's Shedeur's opportunity to take that spot. He's not off to the greatest start off the field, but on the field, he's on to a good start. So we'll see what he ends up doing, but that's how Shedeur can take the job. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.